Bob Clark's Black Christmas is one of the most integral films in the tapestry of the slasher subgenre, and one of my all-time favorites. So, since it has recently celebrated its 50th anniversary, I felt now is the perfect time to do a retrospective on the film and its legacy. If you've never seen the 1974 Black Christmas, I highly recommend you stop the video and go watch it for yourself and then come back here, especially if you've never been spoiled on anything that happens in it. I will be going over a brief plot summary in order to highlight my favorite moments and characters of the film, so especially if you're a slasher fan, you definitely need to take those 98 minutes this holiday season to experience Black Christmas for itself and then come back here to learn some of its history. Famously, the film opens with a POV shot of the mysterious killer lurking outside of a sorority house that he will soon terrorize. This opening is remarkably similar to the opening of John Carpenter's Halloween, which would come out 4 years after Black Christmas. However, whether or not the opening of Halloween or Halloween itself was intended as a Black Christmas nod remains debated to this day. Besides that, neither Halloween nor Black Christmas originated the concept of a killer POV shot, but I'm getting ahead of myself, more on that later. The sorority house is decked with the most nostalgic, yet tacky, yet somehow magical Christmas decorations that the film cameras utilized on this set, and the DP, Reginald H. Morris, they capture these decorations in a way that give Black Christmas tons of texture, personality, and holiday spirit, of course. But one person who isn't exactly in that holiday spirit this year is Jess Bradford, who we will later learn has just discovered she's pregnant with a baby she does not want, since she's a career-oriented college student. Something else that's been getting Jess down are some vulgar phone calls she and her sorority sisters have been getting as of late by a mysterious caller who they dub the Moaner. Jess is also dealing with a lot of tension coming from her boyfriend Peter, who does not approve of Jess's decision to seek an abortion.
I'm gonna have an abortion.
You can't make a decision like that. You haven't even asked me.
I wasn't even gonna tell you.
Jess, I want us to have a baby.
Peter, I can't.
Oh, Christ, Jess.
Do you remember when we first met? You told me about your wanting to be a concert pianist. How it was your greatest dream. And I told you about some of the things that I wanted to do. I still want to do those things. You can't ask me to drop everything I've been working for and give up all my ambitions because your plans have changed. Be realistic. I can't marry you.
Sure you can. What does it change?
Aside from the themes of voyeurism that are communicated through even more killer POV shots throughout the duration of the film, another major theme of Black Christmas is, of course, misogyny. In fact, every male character in this film is written to be incredibly dismissive towards the women, and the exclusively male police force don't take the character of Claire's disappearance seriously or any of the other missing girls until it is far too late, and of course the killer is only targeting young women and says abhorrent things to them on the phone. To make matters worse for Jess, as time ticks on, her sisters begin to be picked off one by one, each given an iconic death scene on their way out.
Claude? Who is that? Who is it?
Aside from the character of Jess, Black Christmas is rich with other memorable characters as well. There's Miss Mac, the cat-loving house mother with a talent for hiding alcohol. And then also, each of Jess's sorority sisters are iconic in their own regards, no matter how many minutes of screen time they get.
Well, we wondered if you'd seen anything peculiar tonight.
Well, not until you got here.
Well, he scared the shit out of me.
Sorry, miss, but you do know there was a girl killed in the park tonight.
Yes, we heard.
Well, we're just helping the police to look for the killer.
Oh, well, we'd ask you in, you know.
But our dog died last night.
Did you know, it is a very little known fact, but did you know that there's a certain species of turtle there's a certain species of turtle that can screw for 3 days without stopping? Do you know how I know this? Because I went down to the zoo and I watched them. It was very boring. I didn't stay for the whole 3 days. I went over and I watched the zebras because they only take 30 seconds. Premature ejaculation.
And then there's horror and Hollywood legend John Saxon playing his first iconic slasher lieutenant a whole 10 years before he would play yet another iconic slasher lieutenant in A Nightmare on Elm Street. As the investigation begins to close in on the truth, the killer picks up his pace with some more death scenes that don't fall short of my overused word of the day, iconic. Just as Jess unknowingly achieves final girl status, Sergeant Nash delivers a reveal for the history books.
Yes, the caller is in the house.
The calls are coming from the house.
Jess!
Jess, get up! And don't go up there.
The climax of the film culminates in Jess hiding in the basement after discovering her friends' bodies. Peter breaks in, desperate to find Jess, and suspecting he's the killer, and in self-defense, Jess ends up killing Peter. The film then leaves us with the unsettling realization that Jess got the wrong guy, as the credits roll with Jess alone in the house as the moaner moans and the phone rings.
Agnes, it's me, Billy.
Black Christmas is a slasher blueprint thanks to the writing and performances of its human characters, who somehow still feel relatable 5 decades later. The film's dynamic cinematography, set in stone, a visual strategy for the slasher subgenre that still is emulated to this day, and its editing is surprisingly smart and oftentimes comedic, as it establishes a motif of using screams to transition into other scenes with loud noises.
Anybody there?
This editing trick is ingenious because it simultaneously explains why no one in the house is hearing the screams, while also creating a stark emotional juxtaposition that has the effect of bringing levity to some of the film's darkest scenes. The humor of this film also can't go understated. Like I said, I blame both screenwriter Roy Moore and the cast of the film for moments like these.
Thank you very
Just remember to lock those doors and windows out, eh?
Okay,
Okay then.
Bye,
Get out now.
No, seriously, do you realize this is the only door and window in this whole house that's locked?
The film's director, Bob Clark, is perhaps most known for his comedy films of the 80s, including box office hit Porky's and holiday cult classic A Christmas Story. But before the comedy genre called to Clark, he did get his start doing horror films just like Black Christmas. After getting his start in the 60s with a sexploitation film about a soldier's forced gender transition, Bob Clark began the 70s with a string of 90-minute horror films. The first of these was a micro-budgeted film called Children Shouldn't Play with Dead Things. And in this horror comedy, children do in fact play with dead things, and thus they learn the titular lesson after they inadvertently resurrect an entire cemetery full of vengeful zombies. Many of the cast members from Children Shouldn't Play with Dead Things would carry over into Bob Clark's second horror film, which much like Black Christmas, goes by many names. Released under the title Dead of Night, the film is also commonly referred to as Death Dream. In fact, if you want to track it down on streaming, you're going to want to use the title Death Dream. But that's not all, folks, as Dead of Night also has another alternate title, The Night Andy Came Home, which of course begs even more John Carpenter comparisons, but there was also one last title used for the film, as during production, the working title, The Nightwalker, was used. The abundance of titles aside, the film was notably released super close to the release of Black Christmas. Despite being filmed in 1972, Dead of Night ended up being released on August 29th, 1974 in Canada, and Black Christmas released just 43 days later on October 11th, 1974. Dead of Night follows a family who must grapple with the return of their son from the Vietnam War, who, ever since returning, has been behaving strangely, to say the least. Just like Black Christmas, Dead of Night features similarly human and relatable characters and dynamics, as well as its fair share of wit, charming practical effects, and a truly bonkers third act. But that brings us to Bob Clark's third horror film, Black Christmas, which, as I alluded to before, also has an abundance of alternative titles. Despite the Canadian release being titled Black Christmas, in the United States, the film was originally released under the title Silent Night, Evil Night, and on US television, the film often used the title Stranger in the House. And then there's the screenplay, which was written by Roy Moore under the working title of Stop Me. Despite all of these nicknames, Black Christmas is the perfect title for the film, and it's deservedly the title that stood the test of time. But speaking of that original screenplay, a PDF copy of it has made its way onto the internet after being included as a DVD extra on one of its many re-releases, and the screenplay features Roy Moore's typing with Bob Clark's handwritten notes and changes, and there's even a couple fully handwritten pages, which is really interesting. I did not have the time to fully analyze this from start to finish, so instead I've linked to it in the description for those of you who are interested and have never come across it before. The heart of Black Christmas is Jess Bradford, but truly it's actress Olivia Hussey who brought her to life. Hussey started her career in the West End before being tapped by Italian director Franco Zeffirelli for his film adaptation of Romeo and Juliet in 1968, which kickstarted her film career. And then after bringing one of the faces on the final girl Mount Rushmore to life in Black Christmas, Hussey didn't exactly shy away from the horror genre, solidifying her Scream Queen status in projects including but not limited to the 1990 It miniseries and playing Norma Bates in Psycho 4. However, she has simultaneously made a name for herself in over 40 film and television projects spanning tons of different genres.
We were amazingly lucky. We got Olivia Hussey right after Romeo and Juliet, huge hit. She was well on her way to being a star.
Shot in Toronto between the months of March and May of 1974, Black Christmas only had a 5-month turnaround, and on October 11th, 1974, Canadian audiences met Black Christmas with a rather lukewarm reaction. It's a tale as old as time, but Black Christmas was at first criticized for its violence and shock value, only to later be more widely appreciated by fans and critics alike for shaping so much of the slasher genre that we know today. Like some of you all, I was not around when Black Christmas was released 50 50 years ago, so naturally some details get lost to time, and I once believed that Black Christmas was particularly notable for originating two horror tropes. Number one being the call is coming from inside the house, and number two being the film's various killer POV shots. However, I am here to make it clear that Black Christmas is not the true originator of either of those things. Firstly, the trope of the call is coming from inside the house truly comes from an urban legend that was a major inspiration for Black Christmas by the name of The Babysitter and the Man Upstairs, which culminates in that very familiar reveal that has also inspired films like When a Stranger Calls. And then when it comes to the killer POV shot, this one's a bit trickier to pin down, but filmmakers have been attempting to use the camera in the place of the killer's eyes for years by the time Black Christmas came around. Bob Clark himself was already doing it in Dead of Night, but the technique also has traces all over the giallo genre, as well as several Alfred Hitchcock films, since he commonly used themes of voyeurism, and there are some very iconic, sinister POV shots in his most culturally relevant films like Rear Window and Psycho. Of course, many people cite films like Black Christmas or Halloween as some of the earliest American slasher films, but the history of the genre is as clear as day with what we just talked about, as so much of what we know as the slasher genre came from Hitchcock films, which then influenced the giallo genre, and then the American slasher genre emerged with an amalgamation of both techniques from giallo, Hitchcock, and some new techniques as well. But while it may not have originated those tropes, Black Christmas definitely played a hand in popularizing them, and its impact can be felt on nearly every culturally significant slasher film that's come since. Something else Black Christmas can claim responsibility for is the creation of another subgenre within the slasher subgenre, that being holiday slashers, which, much like slashers themselves, have come in waves of popularity over the years, but I dare you to pop in any of these holiday slashers and not be reminded of Black Christmas in one way or another. And while it's no Halloween or Friday the 13th when it comes to sequels, Black Christmas's legacy has also lived on with two certified remakes, neither of which exactly live up to the 1974 version, but one has started to receive a similar cult following, just like Black Christmas 1974 once did, and the other one is an absolute misfire in my opinion, but who knows, maybe time will reappraise that one as well, but I sure doubt it. The first Black Christmas remake would come to fruition 32 years after the original, with 2006's Black Christmas, directed by Glenn Morgan, and featuring a cast with names like Mary Elizabeth Winstead and Oliver Hudson. I can definitely see why many Black Christmas fans welcome this version with warm arms, even if I feel differently, but one thing that definitely helps the film is the inclusion of Andrea Martin, who played Phil in the original, and she is a definite standout of this film as well. Where the film loses me is its changes to the lore of the original, as the film goes at great lengths to explain exactly who Billy is and why he is the way he is. The result is a lot of disturbing childhood flashbacks that, personally, I did not need to be spelled out for me so viscerally. The horror of Black Christmas 1974 isn't truly in its murder scenes, it's in the scenes where the killer is watching his victims unbeknownst to them. It's the scene where everyone is laughing, not knowing that their roommate is being murdered upstairs. It's the resolution of the film being that Jess did not catch the killer and the police are doing nothing to protect her. If the 1974 version had explicitly shed more light on who Billy was, the effect would not be the same. Some things are better left to the imagination, but nonetheless, I understand wanting to approach the story from a different angle 32 years later, but again, just not for me. The film made $21.5 million against a $9 million budget, and the franchise rested for another 13 years until it was once again revived in 2019. 2019's Black Christmas, directed by Sofia Takal, is even less successful for me than the 2006 version, but just like that version, this Black Christmas is also focused on sexual violence, and I don't think the topic is handled with particular care in either remake. Nonetheless, this remake is perhaps most infamous for its big plot twist. Spoiler alert, by the way, the murders end up being revealed to be committed by a supernatural cult of frat guys. Once again, this remake commits the crime of overcomplicating the simple yet effective Black Christmas formula. We can bring new nuances and perspectives to this story without sacrificing its open ending, which to me makes the film what it is, and it's a big reason why the remakes just don't do it for me. The film ended up grossing $18.5 million against a $5 million budget. With only those two spread out remakes, Black Christmas has definitely not been franchised to death like some of its contemporaries, but it has amassed a large cult following in its 50 years since release. And some members of the Black Christmas fanbase were passionate enough about the series to organize, crowdfund, and produce not one, but two fan-made films that serve as non-canonical legacy sequels to the original 1974 Black Christmas. Those fan films go by the names of It's Me, Billy from 2021 and It's Me, Billy Chapter 2 from 2024. Both films were directed by Dave McCrae, a Canadian actor and filmmaker. The first film, It's Me, Billy, successfully reached its goal of a budget of approximately $45,000 and entered pre-production in the fall of 2020 and ended up being released on YouTube on May 28, 2021. The film follows Sam, the granddaughter of Jess Bradford, who gets entangled with her grandmother's past when Grandma Jess goes missing, and Billy has now shifted his target onto Sam and her friends. If you're a Black Christmas fanatic and a completionist like me, you'll get something out of both of these films, but I won't lie to you and say that they're doing justice to the franchise. Think of them as they are fan films with budgets. But Part 1 particularly feels like a cut and dry slasher legacy sequel that definitely takes heavy inspiration from the Scream franchise in an attempt to bring Black Christmas to the modern era. The first fan film ends with a cliffhanger setting up Part 2, where Jess's granddaughter Sam is kidnapped by Billy and thrown into the same basement as Jess Bradford herself. Jess never appears on screen in Part 1, but in the summer of 2023, It's Me, Billy Chapter 2 was successfully crowdfunded with a significantly boosted budget of around $111,000, and it was originally reported that Olivia Hussey herself would reprise her iconic role of Jess Bradford. These plans unfortunately fell through though due to health concerns, but the film does feature the return of the character Jess Bradford as actress Lisa Kovac took on the role instead. I do like Part 2 much more than Part 1, although it does fall into some similar pitfalls that not only the first It's Me, Billy film falls into, but also the two remakes fell into. They over-explain Billy and they fully close up the original film's open ending. That being said, this film is really charming and has genuinely solid cinematography, and it also featured the return of Lynn Griffin, who originally played Claire in the original, but in the sequel she plays her sister. Just like the 1974 film, the fan films were filmed in Canada, and they make use of a couple of the film's most iconic filming locations, which I definitely appreciated. I know a lot of people like the 2006 Black Christmas, and as you know, I'm not a particular fan of it, and even less so of the 2019 rendition. So with that being said, if you were to only watch one Black Christmas follow-up after this video, I'd actually recommend the two It's Me, Billy fan films. They're not the most complex things, and they're a much more straightforward modern slasher than a film with comparable style or themes to the 1974 film, but they do have a lot of heart, and they clearly had a blast filming them. 50 years later, the feminist message of Black Christmas is as relevant as ever, annoyingly so. It also serves as a rare early instance of strong written female characters in slasher films, which has always had a somewhat deservingly bad reputation when it comes to female characters. But as Black Christmas proves, strong women have been integral to the subgenre since its inception, and they've been present throughout its history, even if some popular slasher films do reinforce a lot of sexist stereotypes. The fact that the characters in Black Christmas still resonate after all of this time speaks to the film's writing, direction, and performances that are each executed with great intention. As more time passes, I suspect Black Christmas will only gain more cultural notoriety as a true slasher blueprint.